Everyone. If you are seeing this, you are watching the recording of our webinar. And I just want to preface by saying during the live webinar, unfortunately, our guest speaker, Darren, lost power. And so our webinar had to pause for a couple of minutes for him to reconnect. And so what you're seeing in this recording is an edited version just focused on Darren's presentation. If you joined us live, I want to thank you for being so understanding and patient when that did happen. And for those who are joining after, in the recording, you might see some jumps. That's just to account for the part where, the power was out. So things like this happen. Thank you for understanding and enjoy the rest of the recording.
So the advantages of doing that is obviously building that really strong, close relationship with your customer. And similar to farmers markets, don't get into this channel if you don't want to get close to your customer, if you don't want to be communicating and connecting with them. If you're too shy or it's not something you want to deal with, then CSA really is not for you. And we're going to come on about what makes a successful CSA, what are really successful marketing channels to do. And a lot of that is about relationships.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Stephanie Gordon, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Growcer, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. I'm very excited to welcome Darren Stott with Greenchain Consulting. Darren specializes in local and sustainable food supply chains, and he will be sharing his extensive knowledge with us today. So we are very lucky to have him. Darren also helped one of Growcer's customers, the Gitmaxmak'ay Nisga'a Society, with their food box subscription. He played a key role in helping them plan their project and get community feedback. So after this session wraps up, we will be sharing a survey template you can use. The survey template will help you understand, what questions to ask your community, your potential customers, so you can plan your food box successfully. So that survey template will be in your inbox after this session wraps up, along with the recording. So today's webinar will be recorded and sent out later this week to everyone who registered. So do not worry, you will get the recording. So the format for today's session is a little bit different. We're going to have Darren present for the first 20 minutes, share his knowledge with us, and at the end of the presentation, we'll ask questions. If you have a question throughout the webinar, please feel free to type your question in the questions tab, not the chat, in the questions tab on the side of your screen. I have some questions prepared as well if we're slow to start. But for the most part, this is your opportunity to ask Darren what goes into planning and marketing a CSA food box. So as he goes through his presentation, drop your questions in the questions tab, and they will be the first questions we get to after he wraps up. And like I said, again, today's webinar will be recorded. You will get the recording later this week. And without further delay, let's get started. Welcome, Darren.
Thanks, Stephanie. And thanks, the Growcer, for inviting me to present today. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. As Stephanie mentioned, I'm with Greenchain Consulting, and I specialize in the food retail sector, predominantly with local food businesses. And so 20 years ago, I joined a company called Spud, which was one of the first and largest organic grocery delivery businesses in North America. And so I cut my teeth with those guys for about 8 years as director of purchasing, and got a really good understanding of working with local suppliers and selling online and delivering to groceries to people's homes. And then after that, about 11 years ago, I set up my own consultancy firm, just supporting food businesses, primarily farmers, and how they could directly market their product to customers, whether that was with CSAs or farmers markets, or one of the things I really specialize is food hubs and working together with other producers as well and getting their product to market, not just to CSA customers, but also restaurants and retailers and institutional buyers as well. And as Stephanie mentioned, I have worked with a few freight growers, and including one of the Grocer's clients, Nisga'a up in Prince Rupert, and help them launch their service, and in particular, their successful CSA model that they launched last year. And so if we move to the next slide. So I know this is one of a number of presentations on CSAs the Growcer is hosting, but I wanted to start off about why we should run a CSA program and why it's something that I recommend to a lot of my clients, in particular here in BC. And so my assumption here is that people on this webinar and the businesses that I work with that I talk to them about CSAs is that they're predominantly small and medium-sized food producers, and that could be produce producers, but also meat and maybe even some food processors as well. But they want to directly sell their product to the consumer, the customer as well. So that's some assumptions there. So the advantages of doing that is obviously building that really strong, close relationship with your customer. And similar to farmers markets, don't get into this channel if you don't want to get close to your customer, if you don't want to be communicating and connecting with them, if you're too shy, or it's not something you want to deal with, then CSA really is not for you. And we're going to come on about what makes a successful CSA, what are really successful marketing channels to do. And a lot of that is about relationships. And it's not just about the food that you produce, which we all know is awesome, but it's going that next level. So a low startup costs as well, similar to other direct channels, is that you can start off with not investing too much into starting up a CSA. You could even not spend any additional money if you just got some boxes and you're comfortable using an Excel spreadsheet or Google Docs, or even just on a pen and paper, that you could start off with very little investment. As you actually grow and coming onto the disadvantages there, then there are going to be some additional costs to help become an efficient business and managing multiple customers. But certainly to start off with, it's a low entry point. If you're new to CSAs, how a CSA model predominantly works is customers pay up front. So CSA, community supported agriculture. So the community, the customer is supporting your business. And instead of you having to pay for seeds or inputs of some kind in January and February, when you're not growing or selling any product, that you are getting customers signing up to your program. So I subscribed to a CSA here, and just last week, I paid for 20 deliveries that won't start until May. And so that farmer now has that money to obviously invest in their business. So certainly very different from farmers markets where you turn up and you get paid there and then for your time. So nothing up front. Good margins. So margins is what we measure by percentage, not actual cash dollar signs. And
great, thanks. And thanks for everyone's patience. I do apologize for that. So advantages. So good margins. And so again, that's entirely up to you how you manage your business. But, you should be looking at a minimum of 50% margin, if not more. And at the end of the day, coming on to disadvantages is because it's administration heavy and there's a lot of your time are invested into the CSA program. So you've got to make sure you have good margins there to pay yourself and your staff. There's flexibility in a CSA program. So, if you've got restaurants who are demanding certain products on a certain week, you've got to fulfill that. But with a CSA, as we joke, that customers get what they get and they can't get upset. So, whatever's in season, I know we're talking to a lot of freight growers here, container growers, but, whatever has worked or not worked that particular season, that particular week, goes into the box or doesn't go into the box. So it gives you that flexibility there. Higher average order size, so you're getting customers ordering a box of $15, $20, $25. It's complementary to other channels. So if you're in a farmer's market or if you're delivering to other customers like restaurants, so you have gate sales, then a CSA program can be managed within that schedule, and it certainly doesn't compete so much with those channels too. Any unsold product from a CSA can be used elsewhere. So again, with those other channels that you may be in, it can be used there. It's a popular and growing service. So when COVID hit, certainly here in BC and across Canada, there was a big uptake in customers wanting to support local businesses. And as well as wanting grocery delivery, or even just ordering it and picking it up from somewhere. And then consistent revenues. So CSAs aren't as impacted as the weather so much. Normally I have clients who go to a farmer's market and it's raining, it's not as popular, or their gate sales aren't as strong. But with a CSA, as long as you put your efforts in at the start, typically around about January and February for outdoor growers, and signing up those customers, then you've got those consistent customer base and you've got those revenues in place. And then the disadvantage is, it is a small sector, and we'll come on to that in a bit with the marketing side of things, so it's kind of a good and a bad. And so normally a lot of farms, even a container farmer, would probably have more than one channel. I wouldn't rely just on a CSA program. You will need to have other options out there. It is administration heavy, especially when you get to a certain size. You've got all these customers managing their invoices, and you're packing boxes of $15, $20 size as opposed to packing cases, and all the different moving parts there. Again, if you are managing a CSA with other sales channels, then obviously you've got to manage both of those channels as well, so it kind of adds on additional costs, especially when you're growing as a business, because it is complementary to other services. You wouldn't typically have a software program that manages your farmers market and a CSA. So if you get into a certain size, you would invest in a CSA software program. I think Local Line being one of them. That's for the next presentation that's coming up. And then investing in things like boxes and packaging materials. It is customer service heavy, so kind of going to that advantage of strong relationships, and we'll come on to the marketing side of things. You have to invest in dealing with customers and keeping them happy and educating them. There can be large customer turnover, so something to be very aware of, and we'll come on to that towards the end of this presentation, that you might start off really well, but then coming up to sign customers the following year or following years, you might see it drop. And so it's worthwhile investing in a customer service heavy aspect of it all, and building those close relationships. And profits can be small or smaller than other sales channels. So profits we measure by actual dollar signs as opposed to margins, which is percentage. And so because of that additional investment of your time invested in it, there might not be so much dollars left over with all the additional costs that you might have. All right, so how do I set a market is good for a CSA box? So you could do this as part of your planning, and we're going to come on to business planning later on. But this would normally be your first step, like just to get a good feel if it's worthwhile diving into this. So hopefully if you are giving it some serious consideration after this presentation, this will be one of the first steps you'll do. On saying all that, don't be too stressed about it. Don't think it's going to be a big job. With CSAs tend to start off around about 20 customers. That should be a good target to go for. Getting 50 customers, you're doing awesome. And really established CSAs are getting up to 100, 200 customers. So not a lot. And you think about it, you're locking them in for 20 to 25 weekly deliveries. So unlike farmers markets, you might see dozens and dozens of different customers or at your gate sales. But with a CSA, you're locking those customers in, so there's a lot fewer. So that means from a market research perspective, you could just do your market research by trying to speak to them as much as possible, do it guerrilla style. Start off with friends and family and get referrals through your friends and family as well, and ask your neighbors and their neighbors. And before you know it, you should be able to get 20 customers to give you feedback. Whether they agree to it or not is another thing. And the other thing why that's good is CSAs for a lot of customers or people, it's something new to them. So it does need explaining to them. It's very different from going into a grocery store. It's very different from going to the farmer's market. You have to explain to them about, paying up front and where they get how it's picked up and how they don't get to choose what's in the box, that type of thing. Use social media. or your different media channels that you'll have to rely on moving forward if you are to launch a CSA. There's lots of functions on Facebook and other social media platforms just to do surveys or get feedback. And obviously the benefit of social media is it can easily be shared by those people as well. And there's lots of Facebook groups that are based around communities and neighborhoods and different community groups as well that you could just dive into and again ask those people part of those groups. Or you could even run a webinar. So this is what we did with the Nisga'a First Nations group up in Prince Rupert that Stephanie mentioned earlier. And I was pleasantly surprised how popular it was. We had over 100 people dial in. We advertised it through social media and the local media networks there. And it was obviously an area that was ripe for something like this. Prince Rupert is not a growing area by any stretch of the imagination. There's very few local producers there. There is just outside of Prince Rupert, but certainly not within Prince Rupert. So it was a very unique concept. And the Nisga'a group have a garden centre there as well. So they've already had a good customer base and relatively well known in the community. And so we ran a half-an-hour webinar, and we used Zoom. We used their survey function to see what people would pay, to see what day they'd like to pick it up, to see what products they're interested in, to see if they're even interested in it. And at the end of the webinar, we just asked people to let us know if they're interested or not, to leave their email, and we'd contact them after that. So that's always an option. After you've done all that guerrilla marketing and speaking to various people, then you could do some further market research as well. So what other CSAs are in the within the neighborhood, within the district, the region? What are they offering? How long have they been going for? Are they a direct competitor to you? If you're using the Growcer, you're predominantly going to be growing greens and herbs. And so are the other CSAs out there providing any of those products? Are they doing a good job of it? Or are they root crop producers or meat producers? So, is there a gap in the market for your products there? And what other direct marketing services out there? Maybe there are no CSAs, but maybe there's a plethora of farmers markets with lots of herb and green producers out there. Or maybe there's lots of gate sales. Or maybe there isn't, and this is just something perfect for your community and a big gap that can be filled there. Obviously, freight growers, container growers such as yourselves, are producing all year round. So maybe at time of the year, if there's a gap opportunity that needs to be filled. I have another client that's considering being the Growcer client and based in Fernie in the Rockies. And they actually have a really good growing season in the summer, but you can imagine it's a really short growing season. And so there's a huge gap there for well over 6 months of the year for fresh greens. The real good benefit of the guerrilla style marketing is building up a customer base. You've already connected with them. So when it comes to the next step for launching your CSA, then you can just reconnect with them and sign it up there. So we can move to the next slide. So even if you've done your market research and you find out there's lots of CSAs there and lots of farmers markets, lots of grocery delivery businesses, it doesn't mean there's not an opportunity still. Like I was saying, you only need 20 customers. So if you've spoken to 20, 30, 40 people and they're willing to pay for a CSA, then it doesn't matter what your competition is like. You've got to give it a try. And as long as you're offering a better product out there and a better service, then there's no reason why you can't be competitive within a really competitive market like we have here in the Lower Mainland, the region around Vancouver. So Vancouver, we have a really good growing region called the Fraser Valley, and we have lots of farmers markets. We have lots and lots of farms selling direct to customers, gate sales, CSAs. We have lots of grocery delivery businesses, one of which I work for. And there's no limits of selection for customers who want to directly buy from a farmer. Saying all that, the CSAs that I do know of, we have dozens of them, are really popular, and they've seen double-digit growth, obviously because of COVID, certainly helped that, but they are still seeing that popularity out there, and actually the farmer that I deal with, that I have my CSA subscription with, is actually stopping going to farmers markets and just concentrating on CSA as of this year. So they are not going to do that unless they were successful in working with a CSA. They're probably doing it because of one of the disadvantages of having lots of administration work to do if you're doing farmers markets and you're doing a CSA and you're delivering to restaurants, which they do. They have wholesale customers as well, so they're not just relying on CSA. But what I wanted to get across here is that even if it is a competitive market, there's still opportunities out there. Next slide. So one of the things I work a lot with food businesses here in BC is putting business plans together before that feasibility studies. And so just wanted to share some advice here on putting a business plan together. And a business plan does not have to be onerous. One tip I like to recommend, and I started doing it myself, is actually putting a business plan in a PowerPoint and just put some points together in these different sections. I'll go through them in a minute. And it just helps you, understand is the market out there, and then if there is, how you're going to operate as a business, how you're going to market yourself and things like that. And then, you know, get an Excel spreadsheet put together and understand the actual profits and margins of this particular revenue channel. So business plans tend to have around about 7 sections, if not 8, and start off with an introduction about, you know, who you are and what your business is about, and maybe what your vision and mission is, and then a market overview, which would be the market research that you've done on the previous slide. So the conversations you've had, how many people are interested in it, and which neighborhoods you're going to be going to, that type of thing. And then operations plan would be similar to what the grocer would supply and how to grow and what you're growing and when you're growing it and when to harvest it. Maybe what prices you're going to charge, how big the box is that you're going to do from a CSA perspective. The people you're employing and what the type of roles they're going to be doing. And then the marketing plan is all about how you're going to attract customers, how you're going to retain customers, maybe your social media channels, and maybe even some branding as well that you could put in there, but not too important, what your logo is going to look like and how you're going to communicate. And then chapter 5 is normally governance and ownership, and most people are owner-operators of their container farm, and so you just need a little section on that. Business plans are good for you, but they're also good for raising capital as well. So sometimes that governance and ownership is really important. If it's you and a partner, what your background is as business owners, you know, do you have experience in running a farm or even running a business? And the same with your partner, and the same with maybe some staff that you are involved in, maybe even other partners that are involved with your enterprise as well. Like I said, my client, the Nisga'a up in Prince Rupert, they had a number of operations. They had a garden centre, they got cafes, restaurants as well. So that's always good to put in there. Financial plans, so you're bringing that all together of the other chapters, your costs, your revenues, the costs of your staff, your costs of running social media, maybe you're subscribing to local lines, so what the monthly costs of that are, your capital investments, so how much you're going to be paying the grocer for their container, how much you're paying ongoing for maintenance. That needs to all be captured in an Excel spreadsheet there as well. Where your funding is coming from, are you getting loans to pay for it? Is it your own investments? Are you getting investors? And what are some of the principles on that and some of the interest you're paying on that as well? So you can see what your cash flow looks like. And then your implementation plan. And that is before you start, so pre-launch and post-launch as well. So what are the steps that you're going to do to build up to launching your business or launching your CSA, buying your boxes, marketing, making sure your growing is in place, your drop-off points are in place for a CSA, where customers can pick up their boxes, your communication channels, and just making sure everything's in place there. And then what your first few weeks are going to look like as well. In that section, section 7, or sometimes it's in other sections, you want to do a mist mitigation strategy. So just a little exercise again, maybe just one slide in a PowerPoint, what things might go wrong and I'm sure the grocer can help you out with this, and how you're going to mitigate that going wrong. So one key thing would be retention and losing lots of customers from one season to the next. Really be aware of that. What are the mitigation strategies? And I'm going to come on to that in my last slide. Maybe some operational risks are in place, or financial risks that might be in place, and how you're going to offset that. Make sure you've got enough funds in place. Make sure you really understand how the grocer container farm operates, and if power goes out, or if certain machines and things go wrong, what you're going to do there. You're going to have spare parts to do some training. Okay, so the business plan side of things. The next slide. Got a couple of slides there to go. How do I market my CSA? So the best strategy is word of mouth and making those connections and relationships. So hopefully you've done your research and connected with the people in your community, friends and family and their neighbors and your neighbors and community groups. Once you've done all that market research and you've decided that the CSA is for you, is then to go and reconnect with those people who you've spoken to, who showed a real interest in a CSA program, and then get them to sign up and subscribe to your CSA. And really, at the end of the day, that's paying up front, so getting the check written. And then referrals are really key from that as well. Really, CSAs, it's called Community Supported Agriculture for a reason. So it is all about the community. It's about those people you've initially reached out to, really working with them and making sure they get a good service, or they really believe in what you do, and for them to refer their friends and neighbors to you as well. And that is an ongoing strategy. And I found that out working at Spud, the organic grocery delivery business. That was our #1 strategy as well, was referrals. Events and community groups, as I mentioned before, would be a key part of this. Obviously, farm signage, have your signage on your container farm, especially if it's in a predominant area. If not, get some signage up somewhere else. Public relations, especially if it's something new within a neighborhood, then the media normally are quite interested in stories like this. Container farms are quite innovative and a really good story to tell, especially in remote regions where they've never grown produce before or rarely grow it. And so that's always a good story. Social media, super important for marketing a CSA, and super important for that retention strategy. Websites and search engine optimization is really key, and investing in that. And then maybe if you wanted to, flyers and postcards, especially if you're doing community events, and making sure people walk away with something in their hand to look you back up again. And all this strategy is no good unless you've got a really strong customer retention. We at Spud, when I worked there, we would happily pay $100 to get a new customer, because we worked really hard on retaining that customer. And so if we didn't have good retention strategy, then that $100 would not be a good investment. So CSAs are all about retaining customers, good, strong relationships. And so therefore, you'd be happy paying good money for your marketing to make sure that they stick around and make sure you're signing up the right customers. Thanks. Next slide. So just my last slide here before I go to questions. So how do you keep subscribers? How do you keep your customers and then build on top of that base? So if I wanted you to leave with one key thing from this presentation today, is how important customer retention is. There is large attrition, so it's not something that you can avoid, but you've got to try really hard. Don't let it perturb you, but you've got to try really hard to keep the retention high. There will be a strong base that will stick around and who are subscribed to a CSA for clear reasons that I'll come on to with these points here, and you've got to stick to them. So providing an excellent service is obviously business 101, really good quality products, really great consistency with those products from week to week, and be really professional in whatever you do. So from invoicing to the box and how it looks, how you present your product, how you deal with customers, you communicate with them, has to be professional. Personal and insightful communication strategy. Customers are subscribing to a CSA because they want to buy direct from the farmer. They want to have a relationship with you. They want to learn They want to learn from experts like yourself. So that might be recipe suggestions, that might be how your operation works, that might be nutritional value, that might be how a small business runs. So that's insightful communication, but also personal communication. These customers, and you might relate to it yourself, you might be similar as I am. Just have a personal interest in people in your local business, how they're doing, supporting them. They're your neighbor. As I mentioned earlier, that your first customers might even be your family and friends. And of course, they want to support you. And of course, they want to know how you're doing week to week with your business, good and the bad. And so be prepared to share that and be prepared that that is a successful strategy. 360 communication is important as well, so be open to them, feedback into you, asking you questions, that's sharing their experience. Obviously getting to know your customer even more personable, so having site visits as well, especially with your container farm, really interesting concepts. Get schools involved, get community groups involved, or as well as online engagement, having videos, walking people around your container farm. Surprise and delight is always a great strategy, no matter what business you're in. We did that a lot at Spud, including free gifts in the box, might even just be extra budgets, for example. And then there's some really great tools out there, customer relationship management tools, CRM tools, and that help you manage multiple customers. If you're getting up to 100 customers, for example, for the basics of understanding their address, but also maybe even when their birthdays are, or what their tastes are, or who they are and stuff like that, and making sure that you have that tools in place to manage a good customer relationship. Okay, so I really do apologize for the power going out there and some of the hiccups, and so looking forward to some of the questions that we have.
It's all good. I just want to thank you again for being such a pro. Even though your power cut out, you picked up right where you left off. So right now, you, the audience, thanks again for your patience. Sometimes this stuff happens. So if you have a questions, please type your question into the questions tab on the side of your screen, not the chat box, and then Darren will answer. So one thing I do want to touch on is you were talking about it right there in your last slide about customer retention. So you talked about, how long it takes, or sorry, the customer acquisition is harder than customer retention. Have you seen other successful customer retention strategies, either from the CSAs that you're subscribed to or the ones that you help? What are some other things people are doing to retain customers?
It just comes back to some of the things I mentioned in the presentation, which is that relationship and educating your customers. Your customers are shopping elsewhere. There's no doubt about it. Even when I worked at Spud, we had 1,500 products. We did not just produce. We started off with produce, but we had meat and we had liquid detergent at some point. But we knew customers were going elsewhere. So how are we different? How are you different from a grocery store or maybe even a farmer's market? And it's not price. It's not convenience. It's about education and the richness of the service. So the more rich you can make that through videos, sharing information, personal relationships with your customers, the higher the retention will be. So I can't emphasize that enough. So you can go, if you're wondering what that looks like, then because of social media, you can look up CSAs. Even if you don't live in Vancouver, look up CSAs. My one I subscribe to does an amazing job. The guy who's a farmer is actually used to be in communications and PR, and he does a phenomenal job. And so they're called Glen Valley. And obviously you can see that in social media, and you'll see how prolific they are, but how insightful they are as well. And I love it. It's just great emails you get from them. And yeah, so that would be the number one strategy.
Mm-hmm. And so you kind of hit on a good point there, which is like a customer expects more education and more service from, going to a grocery store. It's a different type of customer at the end of the day that you probably want to be recruiting. So good customer retention aside, what are some other qualities that you've seen in successful CSA programs?
So obviously going back to Business 101, where you're offering a great service. So the product the quality of the product speaks for itself. And what I hear with container farms, my customers, is the freshness of the product that's coming, that people are just wowed by it. So another differentiator from your channel versus going into a grocery store is that freshness as well. So don't cut corners on that. Don't worry about the pricing so much as the quality, and making sure that that is always your number one thing when it comes to the product itself, just the freshness and the quality and how it's presented. And people would just be wowed by that. And then following on that very closely is that consistency. It has to be the same week in, week out, that people's expectations are met on a regular basis. And when they go and picking that up as well, you can follow through on that just customer relationship. And I know my clients have been Bryn Throughput. A lot of the product is picked up from them directly, so they actually do get to meet the customer. Some CSAs, they're not present. They just drop it in a location, whether it's a grocery store or a brewery or whatever, and people just pick it up there and they don't meet the farmer. But if you get those opportunities to make those connections, then again, that really helps. Was that answering your question there, Stephanie, or were you?
Yes, you did. And you actually touched on a key point, which is especially when you and the audience, if you're thinking about delivery and pickup, you talked about having a good relationship with your customer is so key. So one thing that you want to think of at the end of the line, if you're doing delivery or pickup, is, is this something that maximizes my face time with the customer? And if it's not, what else can I be doing to develop a relationship with the customer? Like you said, spark joy, recipe cards, info cards on produce storage tips. These are some other examples of something that you can stuff inside what a customer gets. So for the next question, I do want to ask about, our partners in Prince Rupert. So you worked with the Gitmaxmak'ay Nisga'a Society to plan out their weekly food subscription. But this isn't the only model they could have done. They could have done wholesale. They could have done to restaurants. Can you explain a little bit more about the thinking behind why a weekly food box subscription was a better model for them?
It's a better model for them because certainly demand was there. So the demand from the consumers was a lot stronger than it was from the restaurants. It wasn't, though, there wasn't demand from restaurants, there was. The challenge with restaurants, they tend to like what they want for that particular week. There was one or two restaurants that were happy getting what I would call a CSA box program from the Nisga'a, where it was set by the grower as opposed to they could order, I want 10 romaine lettuce this week, and next week I want 15. And so having a CSA box is a lot easier to manage when it comes to what you're fulfilling in there. And I think that was probably the main reason why. It's a small community, so customers picking it up from the garden center wasn't a problem for most of them. So that really helped save on delivery costs. And so you have to put that into the equation. And again, I know there was one question out there about what are the key things to watch out for. And if you are going to be doing delivery, even if it's to a drop-off point, just watch out for those costs. They really can add up. And what we did with the Nisga'a is if customers did want delivery to their home, then we added on a delivery fee of, I can't remember how much it was, $5, $10. Because of the expense that's involved with that. Restaurants obviously want delivery. So if you don't already have a suitable vehicle, you need to invest in a suitable vehicle. You need to invest in, if you're not going to invest in a refrigerated truck, then you need to invest in materials that will keep your product cold for a prolonged period of time. And restaurants pay less as well. So that's obviously one thing to consider. They order more, so that's nice, but what the farms fail to realize is restaurants actually don't order that much more than customers when it comes to produce. I was really surprised by this. Obviously, you'll get one or two that do, but your just family-run restaurant maybe goes through as much produce than maybe one large extended family. It's quite surprising. And so especially if you're thinking about greens and herbs, then, unless they're really salad-heavy restaurant, they're not going to be ordering that much. So, maybe they'll be ordering between $40 and $100 max per week. So that being the case, if they're choosy and paying less for it, then they're not necessarily as exciting customers as your CSA customers.
Interesting
Not so that
points.
Nisga'a didn't have one or two wholesale customers. They do that as well, but mostly because those restaurants were happy having a CSA type service.
Yeah. And so when in the initial stages of that project with the Nisga'a Society, what did you do to engage customers or potential
As I
customers?
mentioned, yeah, as I mentioned in the presentation, we ran a webinar, and I was so pleasantly surprised how popular that was. There is very little cost to running a webinar, so we decided to go ahead and do it. And even if there was 10 people, that's fine. But we had 100 people turn up, and we just advertised it through Facebook and other channels. And but the cost is the same of running a webinar than it is for 10 people and it is for 100 people, or even if you just had a few people. So it might be something you want to consider. It was run live through Facebook, I think, like this presentation. So that really helped. Lots of people were just kind of logging on and just using the tool through social media to do that with surveys and capturing people's contact details through email and stuff like that. So that was the number one strategy with the CSA model. But we also, as I mentioned, the guerrilla style, having conversations with friends and family, community groups, and we did do that wholesale research too, and that was just doing some phone calls to restaurants as well. And like I said, you just needed 20 customers to be a successful start. And so that's not a lot of conversations to be had in your neighborhood.
And this was a point that was also echoed by Carly in our first kind of webinar of this series, where she said it was easier to kind of start small and then build up. So better to start with small membership and then build up. What are some other advantages with, perfecting your craft with, your friends and your family, and then as you perfect your kind of model, you grow more? Or should people just be getting their max membership and then dealing with it then?
Yeah, no, I think the advice is to start small and grow big. I mean, you don't want to be too small. You want to make sure you've got enough revenues coming in. You want to make sure that you're getting the volumes there to really be testing your systems. But it's certainly a learning progress, especially if you haven't done anything like this before. It's certainly new to you as it is for customers as well. There's going to be hiccups along the way. If you're dealing predominantly with family and friends, then they're a lot more forgiving than people who aren't. But again, if you've done your market research properly and you've built close relationships up before you've launched, and you've been really open and honest with people, which is a key strategy to have as well, and just saying to customers, oh, this is new to me, there might be some hiccups, please be patient with me, we're going to give this a try, this is what we're trying to do as a business, we're trying to give you more fresh product, we're trying to bring it more local, we're really invested in your health. Please be patient with us. And then people really are forgiving mostly. And obviously you can learn as you go along with just those handful of customers who really support you and obviously encourage feedback as well. That's that 360 communication really helps with retention. And it really helps with understanding where you've gone wrong and how you can address those. And sometimes you'd be surprised at where you've gone wrong and you didn't even realize. You've just got to be careful out there that you don't want to be too flexible. Complaints will be price, and complaints will be, oh, I don't really like romaine lettuce and you keep giving me every week. But that's not what a CSA is about. So sometimes you've got to let customers go because if you are too flexible and you go, okay, we'll substitute you green lettuce instead of romaine lettuce. Next thing you know, you've got 10 customers doing that, and that's really labor intensive. The whole beauty of a CSA, and again, this is a number tip. Another tip I want to share with everyone, additional to retention and watching delivery costs, is if you can have 100 boxes with exactly the same produce in each box, then the packing time for that is going to be super efficient, and you should get it done in a few hours. But if you start customizing boxes, whether you decided you're going to offer a small, medium, and large box, or whether you're going to allow 10 or 15 customers to have a substitute item in their box, that slows it right down and maybe could even double the time it takes you. Now, people on the phone on the presentation might just think, oh, well, instead of packing it in 4 hours, it's now 8 hours. But that's a lot of your costs is invested in packing. And so it's something to watch out for. If you're doubling your packing time, then maybe that's an extra $200-300 of labor, and that really eats into your bottom line. So if you can be inflexible as possible, and that's what a CSA model is, then the more efficient it is, and you might just have to say goodbye to some customers because of that. And don't be shy of that.
And that is really good advice, to keep in mind your packaging and your labor costs, but also you can't satisfy every customer. You can't be everything to everyone. So, and it's quite interesting you mentioned that, because Carly in her presentation also said the same thing, where every week it's you get what you get, but people love, her and her project and what they represent so much that they want to support. So the customers are there for other reasons. It is community supported agriculture. They like the idea of supporting a local grower directly. So you did talk about 360. Yep, we did talk about 360 communication. Have you seen any specific platforms really provide a really good return on investment when it comes to building a customer base, whether it's email, social media, in person, or any platforms sticking out?
I'm not the most social media savvy person out there, but what I do know is, whether it's a good or a bad thing, a lot of people are on Facebook, and especially the consumer base for CSAs. And a lot of farmers seem to be on Facebook too. Gate sales seem to be managed through Facebook. And so that seems to be the number one tool that's used by most people. Instagram, I think, follows very, very closely behind that, if not starting to overtake it for sure. And then my CSA that I subscribe to uses email a lot. And email allows you to share lots of information, obviously social media not so much, and include links to various places and images. And so, and emails are great for reminders as well. Everyone has an email address. And so kind of like, oh, your box is ready for pickup, or this is what's going on this week. So I think if you've got an email strategy, a Facebook strategy / Instagram strategy, you're 90% there. And obviously, if you want to go ahead and use other channels, whether it's TikTok or whatever, then sure, absolutely, that's only going to add on top of that.
And
I mean, I'd even go as far as to say, sorry, Stephanie, I'd even go as far as to say that I've noticed a lot of farms, and I can't comment about the success of this, that do not have a website anymore and just have a Facebook account. And it's ironic. I go on a lot of my own research. I will go onto Facebook and farm accounts. They'll have a website link. I click on it, and the website is just not functional anymore. And so they're just relying on Facebook.
Yeah, and it's interesting you do mention that email is also very strong, because social media can be quite fickle. We don't know what Facebook is going to look like 10 years from now, but if you have someone's email, you always have a backup way to communicate with them or remind them. And in terms of communication, I'd be interested to hear if you're seeing, are there certain types of messaging that is gaining better traction than others? So when people are marketing their CSA food box, are you seeing more product focused messaging being more successful, or more people focused messaging? So say, for example, product focusing is, we have a weekly box of XYZ, and people focused messaging is, I'm a local grower, I'm doing this because.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's people messaging. That's the best strategy. It's why people are subscribing to your CSA, because of you as a farmer and your business. If it was about products, they could get that anywhere. So it really is just understanding you, your business, and what your recommendations are. They put a lot of emphasis on the farmer, and a lot of they rely on that information. Put a lot of value on it.
So we have a couple more minutes left, so I'm just going to ask a couple of our last questions here before we wrap it up. So we did talk about delivery or pickup. Delivery makes it easier for customers. We're used to kind of getting things shipped to our house, or everything kind of instantaneously. But you said just now, community supported agriculture, the model gives farmers more breathing room to make the focus be on, supporting the farm, not solely focused on, okay, what is the easiest thing for a customer? Can you share a little bit more about, the pros and cons between delivery and pickup? How do people know what's a better option for them?
My recommendation, especially to people who are doing container growing and have just got greens and herbs predominantly, is to do pickup, because your box is probably not going to be more than $20 or $25, and there is no margin left with a $25, $20 box to do delivery. If you think about, if it's a 50% margin, then that leaves you $10 at the bottom line to pay for your, other costs. And so, so can you still hear me okay? Yeah, I just get nervous when things change with what's been going on this morning or this afternoon. So I really encourage people not to do home delivery, even with my clients who have more of a selection, and I actually consult with a lot of grocery delivery businesses to really think long and hard about delivery and how that is managed. And not even to offer free delivery until you get well over $100 average order size. Deliveries now is costing around about $10 to $15 per delivery. It depends on a lot of things, your density, your truck costs and staffing costs and things like that, and average order size. But to do a delivery for $5 and under, you would have to live in Hong Kong or something and have everyone, within the same neighborhood and be really dense delivery route. So if you are going to do delivery, then to add on a delivery charge, a minimum of $5, but ideally $10. So if you've already got a $20 box and you're adding $10 on for delivery, you probably won't get many people wanting home delivery.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this will be our last question before we wrap it up. What are some common mistakes you're seeing when people are starting or running their CSA programs?
Yeah, I mean, we can probably go over some of the key points we've talked about. So not giving enough thought into the relationship you're building with your customer and just thinking, oh, this is going to be super easy and going to sign up lots of customers. No, you've got to invest in this, both from a customer relationship perspective, but also thinking about your packing and being really anal about that and thinking how efficient it can be. Really give some thought about the delivery aspect of it. If you are going to have multiple drop-off points, then just have as few as possible and not do home delivery. And, if you can be in a situation where people are picking it up from your container farm, then that is the best option. As soon as you put something in a truck and deliver it somewhere, then you're going to have some really high costs. Price is maybe another mistake to get into. Might seem about counterintuitive as a business, but not to stress over price so much. It is hidden because that's the other beauty of a box program. It's like $15 or $20 for a box of greens, and people tend to not be able to work out individual items price. So that's great. So try and not do that, individual itemized products, price them that way. But also, you're not there to compete on price against your big grocery stores. This is a completely different service. It's unbelievable, fresh, high quality product, and also the relationship with a local farm and your business at the same time. So that's where to put your focus on, and not necessarily on the likes of price. And then the other thing as well is, as we discussed, is not to stress over building up too quickly, and just do the guerrilla style initially. Start off with 20, 30 customers, and then build up from that point onwards.
Those are some really good points. And you did talk about keeping your produce cool and delivery or pickup. In our next session, we will be talking more about the logistics of that. What does it look like to store your produce? What does it look like to package it for your customer? So next Tuesday, we will be talking about those nitty-gritty details. But for now, this is a good place where we can end it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and for being so patient as there was that little power outage. And a special thank you for Darren for taking the time and being such a pro, even though we had a bit of a hectic start. As you see on the slide, please feel free to connect with Darren directly using his email address if you have a question about anything he has said. And a reminder that as a follow-up to today's session, we will send you a survey template that shows you an example of what it looks like to ask for community feedback, and that is based off of Darren and his work with the Nisga'a Society. So like I said, next week, this same time on Tuesday, our final session, we will be joined by Growcer's customer success team and the folks at Local Line to walk through the logistics behind a food box project. We will talk about, how do you make sure you harvest enough week to week? What are your best packaging options, and how an online storefront works for a CSA. So at the end of the session, you will receive a full checklist of everything you have to kind of keep in mind of when you're starting your food box step by step. So please join us for that last session next Tuesday. And hopefully by the end of this month, by the end of February, you will feel more confident starting your own subscription business. And also a reminder, there will be a survey that pops up at the end of this session. Please let us know your biggest takeaways, your feedback, room for improvement. We'd really like to use it to make these workshop series better. And if you have any questions about Growcer, you can reach it at growcer.ca/contacts. And we have our social medias up on the screen as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. Thank you for your patience. And it's been awesome. Thank you again, Darren.
My pleasure. Thank you.